Hello, Ahmed.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. I hope you're good too. I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, we've been in touch for I guess a couple of weeks now. We've both worked on an amazing film called The Voice of Hind Rajab, and and the more I learned about you, the more I wanted to talk to you because I mean, it's hard to describe like what you've been doing in the last decades. But for people that who don't know you, so your name is Ahmed Khan, and you're the founder and director of the Amed Khan Khan Foundation, and you've worked over the last decades pretty much in every sort of war zones, every conflict around the planet, in Afghanistan, in Rwanda, in Congo, in Sudan, in Ukraine. You are actually in Ukraine, like as we speak, and you've also worked in Gaza. And you recently said, like during an interview, that Gaza was different from anything you'd seen before. Can you tell us? Can you explain why?
Yeah, sure, Frank. And thanks for having me on to discuss the humanitarian situation because, as you know, there's not a lot of oxygen is given to the actual humanitarian situation and the nuts and bolts of providing humanitarian aid in places like Gaza. Number one, there's no safe place in Gaza. Since October 8th, there has been absolutely no safe place in Gaza. In every other war zone or humanitarian conflict, etc., there's always some place refugees can flee to. Even in horrible places like Darfur, you can get to Chad and the Central African Republic, and there are UNHCR camps there. The same existed essentially everywhere. In this case, there was no place for people to go for the large majority of the 2 years, and even now. And on top of that, war crimes were committed in that people would often get notices to move to Area X, and then that area would be subsequently bombed. So I don't know what the legal term for that is, but it's horrific, and it's often beyond anyone's comprehension what that means. That sort of mother and her children pick up from tent X because they've already left their home because it was destroyed, told to move to another tent, and then that tent is bombed. So that's number one. Number two is the difficulty in actually getting aid in over the course of the 2 years until most recently. It has been in fits and starts, and there have been periods where it has been easier to get in. Important stuff like urgent medications and ready-to-use therapeutic food, which is what I focus on for malnourished children. So those are the two main things that would separate the situation in Gaza from anywhere else. For example, if I might say Ukraine, um, Ukraine controls its western borders and its southern borders. So you were able to access the country for evacuations and for aid. In Gaza, they control none of their borders. The Israelis control all the borders. So there's no way in or out without Israeli permission.
And can you tell us, like, sort of practically, what is, how does your foundation operates, and who do you sort of deliver aid to, and how do you deliver aid? Because for a lot of people around the world, I mean, they've heard that it was pretty much impossible to actually get aid to the Palestinians. And over the last 2 years, have you felt that, when there was this like concrete blocus for 3 months? I guess even yourself couldn't really do much about it. But how? So practically, how does sort of the foundation operates?
Uh, Over the course of the 2 years, I've tried to keep my eye on, and I've entered Gaza with Israeli permission. Um, I've tried to keep my eye on the needs of the people of Gaza in terms of and what I could do that perhaps wasn't being paid attention to, or less people were focused on, or less international organizations were focused on. So in the last few months, the issue of severe acute malnutrition for children and moderate acute malnutrition for children has been my focus. There is a miraculous item called Plumpy Nut and Plumpy Sup, which was invented by a Frenchman years ago, and the patent's held by a French company called Nutriset. It's also produced by other companies, Adesia in the United States, Alpenter, a German company, and I purchased. So, for example, to go through this process, first I apply for permission to bring the item into Gaza, and that's through the Israeli authorities. So there's COGAT, there's CLA, there's various ministries that have to approve the notion. I have to indicate who I'm giving it to, who will distribute it, and it has to be an organization that's approved to operate in Gaza by the Israeli authorities. So there are a number of international NGOs that I deliver to that operate clinics inside Gaza. So the next step is once you get the permissions, and that could take time. So in that time you talked about, which was blocked, it would take longer to get that approval. Right now, in the last few weeks, and I think it's probably most likely because of the pressure from the White House, that process is very quick, which is kind of sad in a way because you understand that it could have been very quick the entire time. There was no need for that process to be very slow. So I get the approval, and then you ship. You either ship on a boat to Ashdod port in Israel or on a plane to Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. Then you ask for another approval. Then you need a scan. So it goes through a scan, and the customs go through the items to check for I don't know what. Then you have an approval to move to the border in Kerem Shalom. Then you go through another scanner. Then you have to cross the border, and now you have to approve again to move to our warehouse in central Gaza, and then the receiving nonprofit NGO will pick it up, and then it'll get to the clinic. So right now we're in a process where it's working very quickly, and we can talk about the reasons for that, but yeah, over the course of the 2 years, it was soul crushing how slow it was in knowing the needs.
So you're saying now that it's moving a lot quicker. Would you say, I mean, at the time, I mean, through the blockade and through the genocide, humanitarian organizations have said that a minimum of around 500 trucks was required to get in Gaza every day to sustain life in Gaza. We know that for months, sometimes you only had like 10, 20 trucks, 30 trucks getting in, 0 trucks getting in. Would you say that today the level of aid getting in is enough? And by enough, I put it into brackets because it's going to be enough. Are we reaching like sufficient aid?
I would say that commercially, the large majority of the trucks entering are actually commercial, so that wind up in the markets and people buy them with their salaries. I think, a large percentage of the population is still on salaries from, if you work in a hospital or you work for, any of the local authorities. I would say medicine is greatly in need. Medical equipment is greatly in need, and those items haven't reached the levels. So, you get into the weeds in terms of the details. So when you sort of say trucks, it kind of glosses over the larger picture because trucks could be rice that no one really needs because how do you even cook rice, or flour? I mean, these are important for the bakeries, but again, there are more important items like, for example, the RUTF and RUSF that I mentioned to get children out of acute malnutrition. And then the medical items, the things for the hospital, there's certain medicines and certain medical equipment that's nowhere near the level that it needs to be.
And I was wondering now in terms of the sort of the broader picture. I know you're a humanitarian, but you're obviously working in such conflict zones. Politics are everywhere, all over.
Sure.
As Israel over the last 2 years of a carpet bombing and sort of encaged population achieved anything in your opinion?
No, like I said, I'm a humanitarian, so I like to focus on that. But the reality is, you watch, and I have experience in literally every war zone over the last 20 years. So no, I don't know what the purpose of any of it was because certainly, any of us can read the paper and see Hamas is still there. So if their purpose was to eliminate Hamas, that wasn't achieved. Thousands and thousands and thousands of children were murdered, and we don't know. We haven't heard anything about any answers on any of them. None of them was investigated. So what really was achieved by nonstop 24/7 airstrikes from F-15s, F-16s, F-35s, dropping massive bombs, 250-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs on tents, on hospitals, on schools. You know, if their stated purpose was to rid Gaza of Hamas, they failed. So militarily, you know, I'm not a military expert, but clearly, what did they achieve? And I think it's a great question because I don't think there's a lot of conversation about it. At least I haven't seen it. Like, where are the after action reports or any reports on what the plan was? And what is the plan? And what was the plan over the course of, the first month, the second month, the third month? It was clear from the outset that they intended to terrorize the population, to humiliate the population, to traumatize the population. And you're talking about a population that includes 1.2 million children. And certainly they achieved that because there are 2.2 million people, or 2.1 at this point, who are severely traumatized, who are malnourished. And we don't know what that holds for the future. They also live in a land that's severely poisoned. The air is poisoned. The sea is, the groundwater is poisoned. The ground is poisoned. Um, it's poisoned from the munitions that were dropped on them, and then as well as the buildings actually, exploding. So there are chemicals in all the buildings from the cement exploding into the air and into the ground. So the groundwater is, severely toxic, and we have experience of this from Fallujah. The cancer rates from Fallujah 20 years later are astronomical. And Fallujah was a small percentage of what's been dropped on Gaza. So, yeah, I'd love to know, why they don't have inquiries as to what did we do here, or what have we been doing here.
I mean, I think what you're saying is crucial because there is this organization in Gaza called We Are Not Numbers, and what it's saying is that even the numbers, the horrific numbers we're talking about in terms of injuries and death, and don't give you the full picture, because a genocide, and what you've explained with it's a kind of contamination of the earth, of the water resources, is that even if everything was stopping today, which is not, we've seen since the ceasefire, I think more than 250 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. There will still be more death because of long-term injuries, because of illnesses, because of viruses, and this is what actually a genocide does to you. It's not only a certain period, for many months now, potentially many years, the population of Gaza is still gonna suffer from what's happened, and what is still happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people will need to monitor the citizens who live through this for years, years and years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I think it's unprecedented. So we don't know. It's actually very dark, very scary, and very sad.
And I was wondering, so I mean, you sort of touched upon it, but what would you say is today the most sort of urgent thing that people in Gaza need today?
Well, I mean, number one, there's rubble everywhere, right? Um, that needs to be cleared up. What's the process for getting people back into their homes? Their homes are all destroyed. They're still living, very often in tents or in the rubble of their former homes. There is food available, but I think the psychological terror that's been inflicted on them. I mean, there are very few avenues to get treated for what you've been through, from the trauma, what you've been through. So, it's a whole panoply of things that I could say are the most important at this point. It's probably beyond human comprehension, because I sort of say, there are the 2.1 or 2.2 million people who've been in Gaza, and some like us who've, you know, been able to get in and out. And then there's everybody else, because until you've been there, there's no words for it. You can't really comprehend the level of devastation, the level of destruction, the level of torture of people, of each individual. And each individual story is sort of more heartbreaking than the next. And you actually can't comprehend. You meet someone, and then you sort of meet the next one, and each story is a horror of its own. And we're in this crazy situation where we have to try and humanize human beings. Like, it's like it's beyond belief, because you can't begin to, like, what does that mean? They're human beings. Like, why do you need to focus on humanizing them? Shouldn't everybody know that they're human beings? But again, there's been such dehumanization of all of them. And that goes into, like, why they don't allow foreign journalists. They've either murdered the Palestinian journalists or dehumanized the rest and sort of attack them. And, so the list goes on and on. We need investigations into each murder, each one of them. Like, we should know, like, who were these people? How were they killed? Why were they killed? Every single one of them. We should get, sort of, we should know their names. We should know their stories. So I don't know. It could keep activists and investigators busy for many lifetimes.
Yeah, again, I think it's crucial to have independent investigations. I mean, we talked about Hind Rajab at the beginning of our conversation. Her murder happened more than a year and a half ago, and we're still waiting to hear what happened, why, how, and have any sort of soldiers been prosecuted? What about the chain of command? So yeah, again, it's crucial. But I want to go back to, you were saying, like, um, it's now a bit easier to get access in since the ceasefire, and you can explain why. We kind of know why, right? Because the White House, in a way, and Trump pushing Netanyahu, and which again says a lot of what could have been done years ago, more than 2 years ago now. You were very vocal in condemning the Biden administration, of which you were a supporter, including financially, role in the Gaza genocide. In a way, what is your view of the role of the US in all of this, and what is the view of what Trump has been doing so far? I mean, it's kind of always erratic with him, but do you have any sense of, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to my personal experience and what I read, but essentially, the Biden administration was, complicit in genocide, right? Like, they oversaw it for 15 months. They knew exactly what was happening. They had reports of everything. They knew all the airstrikes. They knew exactly what was going on, and they never stopped it. So each one of those senior members has an extraordinary amount of blood on their hands. Um, and the President Biden himself had said sometime in October that he was going to advise the Israelis not to make the mistake the United States did after 9/11. And I suppose they never did, right? Like, they never pulled the plug on it. So we can very clearly say they were complicit and oversaw a genocide of 15 months. During those 15 months, there were numerous blockades. There were times where it was very difficult to evacuate children who had lost arms or legs. It was very difficult to get the required, like I said, I focus on, sort of emergency nutrition for children and medicine. So I can speak to my experience. It was very difficult to get that in. The United States could make that happen anytime it wants, because essentially, Israel is a satellite of the United States. I mean, that's just a fact. Um, so the Trump administration, in the beginning of the Trump administration, there was an opening, and for the first 6 weeks, medical evacuations rose. It was easier to get aid in, and then in March, the Israelis turned it off, and the Trump administration watched it, and they again sort of were aiding and abetting it for 9 months. At some point, and I think, and this is just my thoughts, I don't know. Um, I think it's a combination of factors. I think President Trump himself probably saw the videos and pictures from every corner of the world, like Rome, you sort of blocking traffic, Athens, Barcelona, Madrid, Seoul, Korea, Tokyo, and small villages, not only big cities, but small villages around Europe and Asia and the United States, of people who say, stop the genocide. I think that's one. I think he is sensitive to violence against children, and there was enough video and pictures of maimed and murdered children. I think there's a part of his base that has reacted against it, and they've been loud and very relentless. Tucker Carlson Candace Owens, that group of people, they've spoken loud and clearly, and that's a significant portion of his base. And then the attack on Qatar also. I think that was, the combination of those factors were enough for him to say, look, we've got to stop this. So, in my, the way I see it is they were sort of committing a, sort of not a, well, an active genocide, right? And like, so now perhaps they're thinking maybe we'll do a slow genocide. So, I don't know that they're capable of actually uh, not bombing, so we saw the bombing a couple days ago. So I don't know what, it's clear to all of us that they wouldn't stop completely. They would always find an excuse to start bombing again for no apparent reason, because we don't know what exactly happened or why they did this recent bombing. So, the United States can clearly put an end to it anytime. They can make sure that Palestinians can, Gazans can try and recover from this, but it's a matter of sort of keeping an eye on it. I think the Israelis might hope the Trump administration kind of takes its eye off the ball, and but at the moment, other than 2 nights ago, which was horrific, uh, I think they're sticking somewhat to what the Trump administration's asked of them.
And just to stay on the Trump administration for a bit, what about sort of the erosion of political freedoms in the USA under Trump, and also their attacks, like more and more, you know, uh, real on progressive philanthropists, like including like yourself. I know I'm not saying you've been attacked, but I know that there's attacks on progressive philanthropy in the U.S. What is your view on this, or are you worried about this?
No, certainly the large, let's say if you call them left-leaning um, foundations have there's a chill in the air on them, and they've held back from funding, what we might call human rights, or some of these very, very important things. And I have no answer for it. I don't know why it's happening. I don't know. Is it political sort of fear mongering? Yeah, it's a tough, tough, tough situation in the United States right now, with regard to the sort of chill in the air in terms of funding for the large, even private foundations. I think individual foundations like me, I don't think anyone's come after us yet, and I hope they won't. But I'm ready. Uh, but I mean, they can't really. I would hope that they can't tell you what to do with your own money. Like, so everything's mine. So but yeah, the large foundations are definitely pulling back from funding human rights work around the world, and it's tough. It's really tough.
Thanks, Ahmed. And that'll be my final question. So, in what ways do you think the humanitarian work you're doing, anyway, all over the world, but more specifically in Gaza, can help, create a better future for a whole generation of Palestinians, while keeping in mind that the issue, and we've talked about this for about 25 minutes now, the issue is before anything political.
For me, I'm really focused on the emergency right now. So just keeping at the moment, trying to get these kids out of malnutrition and get them to health. And I'm going to focus on that. And it's going to take a while, right? So like a lot of these issues, you just have to stick with. So, in the future, of course, we all want a free Palestine. So there are those of my colleagues and friends who are fully focused on that. I would like to have Gazans who are alive and healthy. And the next step would be schools, and the next step would be sort of getting education back to where it needs to be, and getting the jobs back in. And but all of this can't happen without autonomy. If there's no free Palestine, none of this can happen. It's just it's just sort of theory. So I want to be a part of all of it. I hope to work toward part of all of it. But right now, at the moment, like I said, the emergency is still exists, and it's exist for the next couple of years at least, in terms of getting people back to health, both with nutrition and with medicine. So that's my immediate focus in Gaza. But going forward, it's some of the other things I mentioned, and I think we all need to be a part of it. We all need to be vigilant. We all need to stay involved because, again, the other side is just waiting for us to take our eyes off the ball and just move on to something else or change. So, like this stuff isn't you don't get a T-shirt, you don't get like an award. It's not very exciting, but it's hard work and it takes diligence and relentlessness. And I think these millions of people around the world that have taken to the streets, they all feel that, they all live that, they imbibe that, and I think they won't go away. And I think anyone that thinks these movements will go away is lying to themselves and living in a bubble that they need to get out of, because people are aware of what's happened, and they're only going to find out more, because the day real independent investigators get into Gaza, the real sort of outside investigators that are they will not be able to deny what happened in Gaza.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thanks a million, really. And again, thank you for everything you're doing, and good luck with what you're doing or you're going to do now in Ukraine. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me on. It's a very important conversation, vital, and I appreciate you.
Thanks, Ahmed.